Shalom. Today I want to talk about language. Did you know there is an evil language? In your own mind and words, what is language? For me, it's how we communicate. We can speak and our write and our use gestures and our drawings. This includes symbols and pictures. In addition to allowing us to communicate with one another, language is also an identity. Of course, others may learn and speak a language as well, but generally speaking, if someone spoke, for example, Greek, then you might reasonably conclude that the person was Greek. However, this was not originally the case. Genesis 11:1, and the whole earth was of one language and of one speech. Language, be it spoken or written or simply facial expressions, is how we communicate feelings, needs, desires, and thoughts. Indeed, high levels of communication support high levels of productivity and even creativity. Genesis 11:6, and the Lord said, Behold, the people is one, and they have all one language. And this they begin to do, and now nothing will be restrained from them which they have imagined to do. What they began to do was to build the Tower of Babel, or Babel, in order to reach God for their own nefarious purposes. By the way, the magnitude of that tower required the highest level of coordination and communication. Suffice to say, the actual base of the tower would encompass an entire city. However, this teaching is about language. Let's get back on track. In addition to communication, language provides identification. It helps tell others who you are. For instance, a French person speaks French. Likewise, a Japanese speaks Japanese. A German speaks German. A Russian speaks Russian. An Italian speaks Italian. And a Chinese person speaks Chinese. Okay, before anyone wants to jump in to enlighten me, I'm aware that it's Mandarin and Cantonese and hundreds of other languages or dialects. I even studied the language for a while and learned to speak what they try to call the first language, as well as other languages I mentioned. However, I try to keep these teachings simple and accessible to the newly awakened. You understand that my point is that language also unites a people. These languages have all evolved over thousands of years since God confused the tongues of people. Genesis 11:7, Go to, let us go down, and there confound their language, that they may not understand one another's speech. Now that we've established that language communicates, identifies, and unites a people, that it is part of their culture and heritage, what language does an American speak? The first permanent colony in America was British. Now, British is not actually a language. The last time I researched the information, English was said to be a West Germanic language brought to Britain. Interestingly, Britain is actually comprised of two countries, England and Wales, which are located adjacent to one another. However, the name Great Britain refers to the entire island, which has and includes three countries. Again, England and Wales, but also Scotland. Nearby is a separate island country, Ireland. The United Kingdom adds Ireland to the mix, but just the northern portion of Ireland. In general, the British refers to the people of the United Kingdom. Now, just as an FYI, in terms of a capital city for the group of countries, London, the well-known capital of England, became also the capital of the combined United Kingdom. That is, Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland, and England. In America, what is known as American English is spoken. Now, here are a couple of bonus questions. What language does a Negro speak? Where is the country of the Negro? The so-called blacks in America are descendants of a people who were enslaved in America. The people were called Negroes for over 300 years before new terms such as black were adopted. Negro, of course, is just the Spanish word for black, negro. Nevertheless, since they were called Negroes, one might incorrectly assume that they were from a place called Negro Land. Some of you may be aware that maps do exist to show Negro Land in Africa, but don't be misled. These were basically treasure maps made for the ones who came to find, capture, and enslave. More importantly, early American slave posters used the word Hebos, Heebos, to refer to the ancestors of the people called Black Americans today. Scholars identify this as a corruption of the word Hebrew. Yes, the so-called Negro is actually a Hebo or Hebrew, but that discussion is another program. The point is, we speak the English language because our Hebrew ancestors were stripped of their history, culture, language, and thus identity. In place of our ancestral name and language, we were forced to learn the language of those that have afflicted us for 400 years. I've taken you through all of this to emphasize the identity associated with language. I'm not telling you to go learn Hebrew. You can learn it if you like, but always keep in mind from whom you are learning. In fact, you may be learning more Yiddish than Hebrew. Both use the Hebrew alphabet, and Yiddish uses many Hebrew words. Indeed, perhaps that is why our Father tells us in Zephaniah that he will eventually restore unto us a pure language. In Zephaniah 3:9, for then will I turn to the people a pure language, that they may all call upon the name of the Lord to serve him with one consent. In short, the language we speak is not our own. Moreover, when we curse, we speak the language of the enemy. The enemy has embedded his language within the languages of the world. It is the language of evil. It communicates hatred and connects you with the enemy. I recall when I first started cursing. It was a slippery slope. It started with one little word, but that little curse word was like a seed, and as that seed grew, what emerged was a weed with tentacles. It reached out and embedded itself in every other sentence I spoke. Worse yet is when we use the name of God in vain. Exodus 20, verse 7. Thou shalt not take the name of the Lord thy God in vain, for the Lord will not hold him guiltless that taketh his name in vain. How often do you hear a curse that uses God in it? I made a conscious effort to stop cursing. It took time and commitment, but eventually I erased curse words from my vocabulary. Thus, the language I know may not be the language of my ancestors, but I still do not need to embed the cursing language of the devil into it. Speaking without cursing is consistent with being a follower of Christ, a child of God. It identifies you. Recall, Peter was told that he would deny Christ 3 times. Matthew 26:34. Jesus said unto him, Verily I say unto thee, that this night before the cock crow thou shalt deny me thrice. Mark 14:30. And Jesus, Yahushua, said unto him, Verily I say unto thee, that this day, even in this night, before the cock crow twice, thou shalt deny me thrice. Luke 22:34. And he said, I tell thee, Peter, the cock shall not crow this day before that thou shalt thrice deny that thou knowest me. Just as every one of us would think as well, Peter did not believe he would ever do such a thing. Nevertheless, despite Peter's apparent resolve, as soon as Christ was arrested, Peter denied knowing him. Matthew 26:69-72. Now Peter sat without in the palace, and a damsel came unto him, saying, Thou also wast with Jesus, or Yahshua, of Galilee. But he denied before them all, saying, I know not what thou sayest. And when he was gone out into the porch, another maid saw him, and said unto them that were there, This fellow was also with Jesus of Nazareth. And again he denied with an oath, I do not know the man. Peter did not want to be identified with the now captured and accused criminal, Christ. However, his language, in this case meaning how he spoke without cursing, identified him. Matthew 26, verse 73. And after a while came unto him they that stood by, and said to Peter, Surely thou also art one of them, for thy speech bewrayeth thee. The word bewrayeth means to reveal the presence or true character or make something known. Therefore, in order to change, he needed to change his language. Thus he began to speak the language of the enemy. He began to curse or to cuss. Matthew 26, 74-75. Then began he to curse and to swear, saying, I know not the man. And immediately the cock crew, and Peter remembered the words of Jesus, which said unto him, Before the cock crow, thou shalt deny me thrice. And he went out and wept bitterly. Again, in the book of Mark, we see that not only Peter, but they all spoke in a way that identified them. Peter had to curse in order to disassociate with Christ. Mark 14, 69-71. And a maid saw him again, and began to say to them that stood by, This is one of them. And he denied it again. And a little after, they that stood by said again to Peter, Surely thou art one of them, for thou art a Galilean, and thy speech agreeth thereto. But he began to curse and to swear, saying, I know not this man of whom ye speak. As I stated before, cursing is a slippery slope. Once you step onto it, you can find yourself sliding further down than you intended. The one curse word here and there will soon find its way into virtually every statement you make. Cursing can also lead to profaning the name of God. However, if you still curse, my brothers and sisters, don't panic. You have been asleep, but Abba Yah has awakened us. There is no other reason why we as a people are suddenly coming into the realization of who we are and whose we are. So now that we are awake, let us humble ourselves and cry out to our God in earnest. Let us once again turn to and walk with our God, the Most High. Matthew 5, verse 36-37. Neither shalt thou swear by thy head, because thou canst not make one hair white or black. But let your communication be yea, yea, nay, nay. For whatsoever is more than these cometh of evil. Indeed, I no longer make promises when I speak. Instead, I simply seek to be a man of my word. I also do not spend much, if any, social time with those who curse a lot and are not even trying to do better. If you profess to love God, if you are a true believer, a follower of Christ, a child of God, then you seek the light and not darkness. Indeed, in 2 Corinthians 6, verse 14, be ye not unequally yoked together with unbelievers. For what fellowship hath righteousness with unrighteousness? And what communion hath light with darkness? I want to wrap up with cursing makes you ugly. Perhaps not all, but I think many men will agree that a cursing woman is not pretty. A man can meet an attractive woman, but as soon as she opens her mouth and spews out half a dozen curse words in 2 sentences, her beauty, charm, and sophistication fades. My brothers and sisters, it is time to stop swearing and cursing. When you curse and swear, you speak the language of the enemy. Stop speaking the language of the enemy. It is not our identity. It is the language and identity of the devil. To conclude, God said, Colossians 4:6, let your speech be always with grace, seasoned with salt, that ye may know how ye ought to answer every man. Hallelujah.